How's everyone doing?
Good.
Perfect. All right. I'm Chandra, Duggirala. I'm the founder and CEO of AQUA. Our goal is to bring life science IP onto the blockchain. So, blockchain 101, Bitcoin 101, we've all heard, right? Everybody's grandmother knows. Blockchain is a distributed ledger. There's a consensus mechanism to make sure who owns what and who gave what to what, whom. The obvious first use case for this is money, and Bitcoin, probably some other tokens will take care of that aspect of it. Smart contracts, Ethereum and many of its competitors will take care of it. Intellectual property is a natural fit for this because you want to know who originated the idea, who built on it, what the value of the idea is. You need to know the provenance, complete ownership, and lineage and history of all of that stuff. The blockchain is a perfect use case for this. And it doesn't just cover patents and trademarks. It covers every creative activity, music, movies, games, etc., on and on. And for financial products, it's like for insurance, etc. They will all be tokenized eventually, despite what all the VCs will tell you. It's not a unique niche where some sorts of companies will do tokens and everything else will be the same. You see these interesting models with data and storage, but eventually all assets will be on the blockchain. The only problem is the edge of the blockchain and the real world, and that will continue to be a hard problem. And we're solving that for a very important area of life, which is biotech. So let's see how this all fits into biotech. Biotech industry, or startups in particular, have a big problem, which is they have a very limited pool of capital available to them. It's specialized VCs, few of them up and down the Sand Hill Road, maybe some hedge funds. If you're lucky enough, you can access public markets. And because of that scarcity of capital, the investor life cycles are shorter because they're under tremendous pressure from their investors to produce returns. And companies always take longer than expected, maybe 3, 4, 5 times longer than they initially expected. And they're also high-risk projects. They're 2 to 3 times worse in terms of survival rates when compared to a regular tech startup, which is terrible in itself. However, not everything is as gloomy. And we have, many of these companies have really valuable assets. And they have these assets early on in their life cycle. And they're all illiquid. So the life cycle of a biotech company is lengthened by the illiquidity of the most valuable assets that they hold, which is their intellectual property. For a tech company, you could argue the organizational structure, the people they hire, their market penetration, brand, et cetera, they all play into how valuable that company is. For a biotech company, more than 95% of the value is in the IP. If you don't have the molecule or the IP, you're toast. So valuable IP exists early on in the life cycle. It's very illiquid until you can actually make a strategic partnership deal with a big pharma or a biotech company. Or the VC IPO alternatives are very lengthy, onerous, and not available to most of these companies. So what if you could provide non-dilutive capital by monetizing this key asset that these companies have? And let's see how we do that. So AQUA platform enables the intellectual property held by these companies to be validated in the sense that you can assure the ownership and provenance of that piece of IP. You can commission oracles and validators who can do due diligence on the strength of the intellectual property in the IP landscape, as well as the scientific validity of that by a distributed network of experts. And then these tokens that represent stake in this intellectual property is tradable. So what this does is it provides early stage liquidity for companies. They sell partial IP rights to a much larger pool of capital holders than the few VCs, PEs, or hedge funds that are currently participating. If you ask yourself who determines what kind of therapies get to the market, it's a bunch of people on Sand Hill Road at 3 or 4 big biotech companies, and that's pretty much it. We believe that every one of us have either a disease risk factor or a family member with a disease risk, or we have a disease or an area of science that we're personally passionate about, but we're basically sitting out of this. We have no way to determine what gets funded, what gets to market, where research resources are allocated, but now we can. And tokens are directly tied to the value of the intellectual property, and as the funds contributed to these projects, push these assets through the clinical trial pipeline, the asset value increases, token value should appreciate. Fairly simple model. So tokenization allows monetizing the most valuable asset in biotech, allows them to access a completely different pool of capital that was not available to them before. It's total democratization of access for this very important area of research. It's less dilutive than equity funding because this doesn't go into your cap table. It's way less punishing than debt. And you can fund projects much faster. So we all know time is money, right? In this specific case, time is money and a matter of life and death. Are we making all of this up? Is there actually a market analog to this or a proxy to this in the real world? Yes. In the real world, this is called synthetic royalties, meaning you have a piece of intellectual property and you sell the future stream of revenue or profits, dividends, whatever you want to call them, to a strategic partner. Huge deals available to late-stage companies, potentially public, already in the market. But the bigger crunch is in the early-stage biotech companies where this problem is more acute. So we're bringing this model, making it a lot more efficient and cheap for these early-stage companies to participate in. And for the companies, the biotech companies are not crypto native. I mean, if any one of the biotech CEOs is in the room, they probably didn't get what the hell Peter was talking about. So all we need to make sure so that they could participate is make it easy to use, one-click functionality, simple to understand, reduce the complexity of negotiation, and minimize transaction costs basically. Make sure that they trust it, it's cryptographically secure, enforced by a pre-agreed and validated set of contracts, not just an arbitrary set of terms. Access to the network, to summarize, provides non-dilutive capital to early-stage biotech. This is complete democratization of capital. They get to access this new pool of capital that was never available to them in the first place. Makes the workflow, their business process, much easier, both in terms of raising their money, negotiating, and eventual liquidation of their assets. And definitely shortens the life cycle of these biotech R&D companies. In terms of our team, I am a physician by training, a serial entrepreneur and an inventor. I've dealt with all of these problems that I just described to you in various phases. I started a medical device company, a digital health company, and a biotech company, and a crypto enthusiast. Our chief scientific officer had many careers as an academic, executive at Genentech, and right now, a part of a startup. Our CTO is a Stanford engineer, expert at security and big data, and George is our chief operating officer, crypto veteran. He prototyped the first functioning Bitcoin debit card way back in the day, which is 3 years ago. We're on crypto timeline here. So our advisors are also people with real chops in the industry. Jed McCaleb, you probably recognize, is the founder of 2 of the top 10 cryptocurrencies, I think, today by market cap, Ripple and Stellar. Micah Winkelspeck is the CEO of Jim, which is a healthcare blockchain company, probably the largest. Eric Martindale is from Blockstream, and now Fabric. Brandon is a good personal friend, and he's also the chief software architect of Blockfolio until recently. Frank Faries is an IP lawyer, and we have some other real rock stars who are helping us build this product. So, biotech can also be tokenized. That's nice. Very cool. take some questions. Yes, I have some time.
Great. Why AQUA?
Why AQUA? It wasn't taken.
I really see that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I really see that there's a huge cost for your technology and the businesses that start with that, and then after it's not bought up or used, it's pretty much worthless. Have you looked at a way to standardize the collection of the data so that other people can actually use it in the future?
I am not sure I understand the huge cost of the technology part. Are you talking about building the platform or?
For biotech, I mean, for people to actually collect and do studies and collect all this data, it's a huge expense.
Mhm.
And then if it turns out that they don't make it into something, that data is still sitting there. There's been a huge expense to collect it. Do you feel it's reusable by someone else?
Typically, it does end up being valuable. So when you take an asset and you put it through a clinical trial, and the trial fails to meet its primary outcome endpoint, just the fact that you have more clinical experience with that asset makes it more valuable. And the data itself is also valuable because you can build on it. You can have a modification on the drug. Someone else in this space would find it valuable. Right now, because of the way intellectual property is structured, they end up going into receivership, and most of the value is lost. It doesn't have to be, because tokens are perpetually held.
I think one more here. Let's go.
I don't think I get the trading aspect and utility of the token as a protocol. It feels more like just a share in a piece of intellectual property and more like a security.
So I did not go into the details or the mechanics of how the tokens are issued, what the token represents, how the tokens are liquidated, but you're welcome to read our white paper. It's very detailed in there. I don't want to take over the entire conference. So.
Give a big hand for Chandra.